Welcome back. Now in our program, we have with us an affiliate attorney of the Pacific Justice Institute, Alexander Haberbush. Welcome to the program, Alexander.
Yeah, thank you. It's very good to be here. I'm glad that I can join you today.
Yeah, thank you. Now, a little bit of your background. You have a private practicing law firm that specializes in debtor and creditor law.
Yeah, that's my family firm practices
your family
creditor
firm.
law. Mm-hmm.
And then in addition, though, you've also started a nonprofit called Lex Rex Institute.
That's correct.
Defending religious freedom, and many of the same parallels of what we do at Pacific Justice Institute. Mm-hmm. So hats off to what you're doing, and it's great to work with you and to partner with you. I know we at Pacific Justice Institute, we have like offices across the country, coast to coast in 16 states, 5 offices in California. So we have a lot that we do in-house, but a lot of our work is working with affiliate attorneys. Mm-hmm. They're involved in a case. We coming alongside, helping with perhaps some of the costs, some of the expenses, or in different capacities. And I know you have at least one case like that we're involved in working with you on. We're going to talk about that case today. If people want information, though, about Lex Rex Institute, where do they go?
Yeah, so you can check us out online at lexrex.org. That's LEXREX.org. It's a Latin phrase, means the law is king, because in America, Joe Biden's not our king.
Right.
Gavin Newsom's not our king. The law is king.
Right.
The Constitution.
And King George was not above the law. That's what our nation was founded on.
That's what we asserted, or declared, rather.
Yeah, and our Constitution validates that. Our Declaration of Independence, Constitution. Mm-hmm. So that goes. I love that. It's a great name. And I used to work for John Whitehead, who was the head of the Rutherford Institute.
Yes. Yeah.
And he wrote a book entitled Lex Rex. Mm-hmm. And that whole concept of understanding that is so important for our Americans, so we can maintain our freedom and keep government in check, and remember how important it is to keep tyranny in check, like the tyranny we're facing today, and that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, well, that's sort of our philosophy of the Lex Rex Institute. Everybody learns in 5th grade about checks and balances on our government. We learn, legislature checks the executive, checks the judicial, and vice versa. Our view is that the most important check on government is we the people, the very first 3 words of the Constitution.
Right.
And it's we the people, ultimately, I think, that have failed. Not that our public officials have not also failed, but when they fail, we're supposed to hold them accountable. So
Right.
Lex Rex Institute is here to kind of help people do that, both on the legal side of things in court, and then also by educating and informing the public so they know what our Constitution says.
Yeah,
because you're not going to do that without an educated republic.
No, that's so true. That's so important. That's one reason why we at Pacific Justice have so many resources on our website for the same reason. Mm-hmm. First 3 years, but I founded the organization back in 1997. First 3 years, it was like, okay, let's take on the case, let's litigate. And after 3 years, I realized, wait a minute, there's such a huge, much bigger problem of ignorance.
Yeah.
People of faith not aware of, and parents not aware what their rights are.
Right.
And so we began producing things like that. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, both on the professional side with your debtor-creditor practice, private practice, but also what you're doing with Lex Rex Institute. That's very commendable.
Thank you.
There's a lot of misunderstandings. Talking about tyranny with regards to vaccine mandates. There's a lot of misunderstandings with regards to people about the vaccine exemptions.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. What are some of those misunderstandings that people have about the vaccine exemptions?
Yeah, so we get a lot of calls from people who are interested in some kind of exemption to the vaccine. Usually it's employer mandates. Majority of our calls are employer mandates, although we take other clients as well. And I would say that the misconceptions that I hear repeated most often are that the only way out of getting the vaccine is to have some kind of religious or medical exemption to it. That's not true. I think those are probably the surest, most rooted in strong, solid case law. But there's strong statutory law, both at the state and federal level, as well as the U.S. Constitution, I think makes these sort of employer mandates illegal across the board.
Right.
And we're willing to take cases from people who have no religious objection to it.
Right. And I think that's important to note. Some of these points you're talking about are not as strong in terms of the medical exemption, the religious exemption, as far as, so if someone was out there, you had a potential client, and they could qualify, based upon their faith for religious exemption and their convictions, or they could qualify because of their medical situation for a medical exemption.
Sure.
You would obviously recommend them to take full advantage of those opportunities, but at the same time, for those who don't fit into that, there are some arguments that can be made, statutory arguments. They're not validated yet amidst this tyranny and litigation, but that's how
Right.
things get validated, is by filing those lawsuits.
Well, and what I would say is if you genuinely do object to the vaccine on a religious basis, absolutely bring that claim, and we'll bring that claim as well. But I have a lot of people who call in and say, I do object to this on religious grounds, but I think the whole thing is tyrannical. I don't know why I have to bring it that way.
Right.
So we say, we still recommend that you do make that religious accommodation request, but we'll bring all your other arguments as well.
Exactly.
We can talk about California, and we're one of the states that doesn't protect people's rights most of the time. But when it comes to privacy matters, we actually have some of the most robust protections in the country.
Yeah, we do. We
yeah.
definitely do. And our attorneys involved in our litigation, we have a lawsuit right now defending law enforcement, police officers in Los Angeles against the LAPD, and their rights are being stepped on. We're representing people in hospitals, doctors, nurses, teachers, public school teachers, government school teachers, being attacked, and then of course in private companies as well. So there's so much litigation taking place. I really appreciate your point. I think that's something that attorneys, as advocates, we need to take full advantage of their opportunities under the law for our client, both the strong arguments as well as maybe the weaker arguments, but still have a chance, a bona fide chance of prevailing. So I think that's real important.
Well, and one more point on that. I would say that if you are somebody that maybe you're on the fence about bringing a religious claim, you don't really think that your religion prohibits it, I would say don't feel like that's your only option.
Right.
There are other options. The last thing we want is for a bunch of religious claims that are fairly clearly not genuine or not sincerely made to go to court, because what ends up happening is the court then forms a new standard or test to determine whether or not someone's faith is sincere.
Yeah.
And as believers, we really don't want that. We don't
No.
want the court testing whether or not someone's belief is sincere.
On the flip side, I've talked to people before and clients where they're not theologically very confident. They're not articulate.
Yeah.
They say, I just think this is wrong. I don't think God wants me to do this. And I'll say, why? So I'll start asking questions like, well, why? What is it about this? And they'll say, because it's going to, I think it's going to hurt my body. Well, why does that matter to God?
Yeah.
Well, because God made my body and he wants me to take care of it. Why do you think God wants you to take care of it? Well, I know the Bible talks about that. It's somewhere.
Right.
I said, well, can you do some homework and find that in the Bible? Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And so,
well, that's just it. Your sincerity has nothing to do with your knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I get to the core of do they have that sincerity there? Okay, then we could, with asking the question why and some other questions, we can help them help formulate it and articulate it. And we have some of that information on our website, I know at pji.org, with a lot of called vaccine resources that help in that regard as well. So there's some definite misunderstandings. I'm glad we talked about that. So as far as exemptions, there are a number of different angles, and it's important to pursue those. You have a specific case that we at Pacific Justice Institute are partnering with you on that I want to talk about. I think is a classic case of injustice under the guise of these mandates.
Oh,
and we're not dealing here with an employee. We're dealing here with a college student named Victoria
Catano. Yes.
Give me some background about her and her case.
Yeah, so Victoria she's an 18-year-old student. She's on the autism spectrum, and she was all prepped, ready to start college, her first semester of college this fall. For a variety of reasons, because of her religious belief, she's unable to get vaccinated, as well as because of her medical disability stemming from autism, she has issues wearing masks. And she has issues with the testing protocols that people have been putting in place. So, she knew this was going to be an issue going into college. So when she was searching for colleges toward the end of her senior year in high school, she specifically looked for one that would not have any kind of vaccine requirement, and one that would not have stringent, overbearing requirements in terms of testing and masking and all the rest of it. Found one. That college was Mount San Antonio College, Mount SAC. And even did a test run over the summer. She took a class over the summer where she made a medical accommodation request to be exempted from masking. There was no problem with that. Nobody marginalized her. Nobody ostracized her. But then, lo and behold, a week before the fall semester was about to start, her school changes its mind and decides they are going to have a vaccine mandate. And makes her essentially do the whole process all over again. This time, they end up telling her, we can either accommodate your faith or we can accommodate your medical disability. We can't do both.
You can't do both?
Well, they haven't put it in precisely those words, but that's what they're saying. Yeah, they're saying that she can either take classes exclusively online from an online catalog. Now, prior to this, Victoria's, she's exactly the sort of person that usually legislators in our state would be trying to protect.
Right.
She's a woman on the autism spectrum who's involved in a STEM field. She was an engineering student taking robotics classes, loving them. And then they tell her you can take classes from our online catalog which don't even include the requirements for your major. Or you can go in class, in person. We'll give you an exemption to the vaccine, but you have to be tested weekly and you have to wear a mask. Which that does not work for her because of her her medical disability. For you and I, wearing a mask is annoying. For Victoria, the tactile sensations of the mask on her face are extremely distracting.
Yes, and I want to touch on that because I think that's what makes this case particularly frustrating. Here is a young woman, who has already overcome obstacles.
Oh yeah,
autism. There's a spectrum. Given, but someone that has autism, they definitely have hurdles they have to overcome. Mm-hmm. She is working hard to overcome those. She has tremendous capacity and potential academically in areas dealing with STEM.
Right.
Where we're dealing with areas of education that benefit society in such a tremendous way. Right. In our ability to compete with countries like China, et cetera. And yet she has a bona fide medical concern. I mean, yes. People with autism, this isn't, just something made up. Right. This is a given. Yeah. They have a particular difficulty to have a mask on their face.
Right, and she has a doctor's note attesting exactly to that. And she's basically told, we can't do anything about it. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
That's outrageous. That is ridiculous. Okay, so she hunted down the right school that was going to not require the vaccine. She finally found it. She went through the work to apply. Then they did a bait and switch, said, oh, no, we're changing our minds. You've got to be vaccinated. You've got to go through the application process again. And she was effectively denied and says, okay, you can do it via Zoom. And you're not going to...
not even Zoom. It's their online catalog.
Oh, the online catalog.
Yeah, these are pre-recorded classes, and you watch them. Okay. And you maybe participate with some other students in an online discussion, but
that's
it. Yeah.
No, you're not like asking the professor questions and things like that in a real term. So it's not even a Zoom. Okay. So that's an option which she has, this online classes. And the other option is not a feasible option because of the mask requirement. Right. And so she's left out high and dry.
Well, and the question I have for the school, which they haven't answered because they've been terrible about any kind of communication with Victoria or with my office. The question I have is, what could Victoria have done differently in this situation? She starting college is a huge transition for anyone, but particularly for Victoria with her condition, new experiences like that are daunting. Particularly new experiences that involve social aspects, as socializing can be very, very difficult for her. And the way that she prepares for that sort of thing is that she really researches it and she makes sure that she knows every detail beforehand so she can prepare for it. Right. So sort of having her expectations, having that rug pulled out from under her, it's been horrible for her. Her mom says she's been in the fetal position for hours on end just because she can't cope with what's been going on.
Really?
Where previously she was learning about robotics, didn't feel marginalized among the other students at all, was made to feel like one of the group, and then to have that stripped from under her, that rug pulled out from under her, it's just been devastating.
Okay, you said sort of in a fetal position. That's a cry for harm, for damages against her that she's going through. And it's not like the college doesn't know about her condition,
No,
autism. They know full well about it, and they're still insensitive to her disability and her situation.
Well, and on top of that, in the meeting where they were considering whether or not they could accommodate Victoria medically, Victoria has real trouble meeting on Zoom. It's sort of a sensory overload. She's not able to relate to people in the way that she would face to face. They insisted on having her meeting to decide whether they could accommodate her on Zoom. And Victoria ended up asking 24 hours beforehand, can my mom appear on my behalf for that meeting at least? And they did allow that. That was before she called our office. Now we're taking over all that communication. But it's not just been that they haven't accommodated her, it's almost been an insult.
Right. I know Pacific Justice, as I said before, we're partnering with you. We're assisting in this case. Where is it at right now in litigation?
We just filed our complaint on Monday.
Okay.
You can actually read it on our website, lexrex.org. We have an article that accompanies it. That'll give you more detail on Victoria's case, exactly what's going on with her. And that links directly to our complaint. It's I think it's almost a 30-page complaint. We have 13 causes of action against Mount SAC because they've really screwed up on this one, and we hope this is a wake-up call to them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the reason I think it's so important that we talk about this case, because it's easy to focus on the big game and the major cases. We had just filed, for example, a class action lawsuit on behalf of firemen up in Seattle. We have another class action for doctors and nurses pending in New York, and we have another major lawsuit in Miami dealing with parents where kids are being forced to wear a mask, even if parents object to it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of big cases, but with these big cases, sometimes we forget the individuals involved.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why I think this is so valuable, to understand the real hurt, the real pain that this woman is going through because of the callousness and insensitivity and unlawful activity taking place by this college.
Yeah, well, and I've got here a section from the California Education Code. This is law in California. This is what their stated position is with respect to women like Victoria. And they say California's public schools have an affirmative obligation to combat bias and a responsibility to provide equal educational opportunity in furtherance with California's mission to afford all persons in public schools, regardless of their disability and religion, equal rights and opportunities in educational institutions of the state. Now, say what you will about how reasonable their COVID policies are, about whether or not they need to be making every student mask or what have you. They are not doing this. And this is required by California state law. I would argue they have not even made an effort to do this.
Right. Yeah. It's apparent on its face. It's a clear violation. Yeah. Of the Ed Code. There's also other case matters that you're involved with as well, which I want to recognize you for.
Thank you.
It's dealing with the actual wrongful termination.
Yeah.
Kinds of issues and kinds of claims. You even have a case dealing with harassment, or cases of harassment, if you will.
Quite a few of them.
So let's talk about that. How these vaccine mandates are actually being used by employers to harass employees who have sincerely held religious beliefs or other objections with regards to these vaccines.
Yeah, well, I won't mention the company since we haven't filed a complaint in this one yet, but there was one company that they required their employees who were unvaccinated to wear an identifying badge, which sounds a little bit familiar to me. I'm not sure where I've heard that one before.
Oh, it's like the Gold Star of David.
That might be it. Yeah,
it
might be
in
that
another
one.
country in Europe. Few decades ago. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't think that was looked upon as favorable precedent, but.
Yeah, but they're actually requiring them to wear a badge telling everyone that they're not vaccinated?
Yeah, and not just coworkers, but it's a company that has customer-facing employees, so customers see this as well.
Wow. So it sort of creates this hysteria, and then also...
Yeah, that seems like the goal.
Yeah, and intimidation.
Yeah.
And this person is going to be treated differently.
Yeah.
Because they've got this badge. If people knew that they weren't vaccinated, that's one thing. But to have a badge saying, reminder, I'm different, I'm not vaccinated, I'm dangerous, even though they're not dangerous, and people who've been vaccinated as far as the Omicron, the reality is they're just as vulnerable to getting it and spreading it.
Well, I
so
can't
it doesn't make any sense.
I can't imagine a reason to do that isn't having those employees treated differently. it's discrimination against that isn't based on medical disability or based on religion. It gets rational basis review, lowest form of review the court can give, which does have to show some kind of rational relationship to a medical outcome. I don't know how you do that with wearing badges. I don't think they can. But I've had other cases. I have one other case where a woman's supervisor shouted over a PA system that my client was not vaccinated.
Really?
So all the coworkers heard, yes, that happened.
Wait a minute. So this is outrageous. You're saying the employer on the loudspeaker,
Yes.
for all the employees to hear, announced that this particular employee by name,
Yes.
was not vaccinated.
That's correct.
And what was the context of that? To say, watch out for her, she's not vaccinated?
Yeah, essentially.
I mean, that's effectively what was being said.
Yeah, it was compliance with some rule regarding what she was supposed to do for testing, and the employer just gets on the loudspeaker and says, employee by name who is not vaccinated is required to do X, Y, Z as far as testing is concerned.
Now, the employer couldn't just communicate that directly to the employee?
She already had. She was talking to the employee at the time.
Yeah. But this is in front of everyone.
It was, yeah.
And that was clearly uncalled for and unnecessary.
Yeah. And that's we've seen all kinds of things like that. I had one attorney who I was opposing on one of these cases. I was talking to her, and she said, well, what you have to understand about your client is your client's just a troublemaker. For this past year, she's been trying to get people to stand on their religious convictions and not get the vaccine if they have a conviction against it. And I say over the phone, so you're telling me the reason that you don't think my client has a case is that you've been discriminating against her for the past year? I'm just told this conversation's over, and the attorney hangs up.
Well, I commend you for what you're doing in those kinds of cases. You're dealing with cases, and we are dealing with in-house a lot of cases, dealing with unpaid leave.
Yes.
Tell me about some of those situations that you've dealt with.
Yeah, so, I think the real reason that employers are mandating vaccines at all is they're afraid of what the government's going to do to them. They're also afraid of people like us that are going to push back against these vaccine mandates. So employers have gotten very non-committal in a lot of cases, and they're not willing to fire people who won't get vaccinated outright. Instead, what they do is what we call a constructive termination, which in most instances will consist of placing that person on unpaid leave while technically leaving them as an employee, but they don't get paid anything during that period of time. The hope is that eventually you'll quit, and then they haven't fired you. And if you don't quit, what we're now seeing is they'll give you a contract that says, effectively, I agree to my own termination in exchange for, usually it's keeping benefits of some kind for 3-4 months, usually health insurance. Our position is these contracts are inherently coercive. You're basically holding somebody's health insurance, their well-being over their head for whether or not they're going to sign your contract. But those are some of the tactics that employers are using right now. Yeah,
we've seen it where it's been done on the computer, where the employee actually requesting a religious exemption. They answer these questions on the computer, and then at the bottom there's like you click a box for an electric signature, if you will. But in the language it says, I hereby affirm that by signing this, that I acknowledge that if this religious exemption is denied, it will function as an automatic voluntary resignation on my part.
Right.
I think saying, no, that's not a voluntary resignation. And we were telling clients, when you fill out that information, put in the box that you do not resign if this is
Correct.
If this is not accepted, if this is denied, you are not resigning. You intend to continue work at the company. And but it's really hideous what the other side is doing.
One more thing to be aware of along those lines is a lot of employers now are requiring people to sign third-party agreements for processing all of the testing information and vaccine records with respect to COVID-19. If you look at the privacy agreements for some of those companies, they're really outrageous. Yeah. They have things like your medical records may be disclosed to foreign governments in them.
No, one of them actually is owned by China.
Yeah,
by a Chinese company.
One of them is currently under investigation by the FBI for disclosing records to China.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of employees saying, I don't want to risk my identity and all my information being given to China.
Right. Well, and it's not even a risk. That's what they say they're going to do in their privacy policy. Yeah. And this isn't a crackpot investigating, and this is the FBI. This is serious.
Yeah, I'd love to see them doing constructive things instead of going after demonstrators.
Right.
or parents at school board meetings.
Yeah, who knows how many resources they've devoted to this, but they are investigating it.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see them doing this. That's very positive, very constructive. The fact is, there are so many people out there who don't know their rights. I know we have helped so many across the country, and we love working with attorneys like you, affiliate attorneys. You have your own private practice, and you also have your own nonprofit, LexRex.
.org.
LexRex.org.
Yep.
I encourage people to take a look at that. And as we move forward, Alexander, I think that there's a good chance that we're going to see this come to a head with the Omicron. I personally predict, I think in 2 months it'll be in the rearview mirror. Some people say I'm a little optimistic. But we're still going to have these cases.
The medical threat might be gone, but the coercive threat won't be.
Yeah, and it's so important that we stand up to these, because if we let them get away with this, it'll set precedent both socially as well as legally that government can get away with this and that private employers can get away with this when they get the okay from the Biden administration or Governor Gavin Newsom or others in authority. So this is really important. Thank you once again for being on the program.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and it's a blessing to work with you and the very important casework that you're doing defending religious freedom.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for Pacific Justice's help. We really appreciate that. You guys are the experts on this.
Well, thank you. Well, folks, there you have it. It's our God-given freedoms we're talking about. Now, let's choose to keep them. I'm Brad Dacus, president of the Pacific Justice Institute. Let's continue the fight for your freedoms.